Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have another team report from Portland Regionals, and I'm joined by another top player. I am joined by Navjit, or NJ11. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Adi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the channel. For those who don't know you, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Navjeet or NJ11 online. I've been playing VGC for roughly 2.5 years. I started in Sword and Shield during the pandemic and kind of just started working my way through the online circuit. And yeah, now that live events are back, I'm happy to just be uh, kind of going at them in full force here.
Yeah. I think, in the 2020, 2021, you were definitely known as like a stealth team builder, someone who would put together a
Yeah.
lot of the teams that people would pop off with. And so it's really great to see you with a very creative team. No surprise there, doing really, really well yourself, getting all the way to top eight of the Portland Regional Championships,
Mhm.
using a team with Screamtail on it. So not a Pokemon that we've really seen in Series 3. Talk me through your team building approach for this tournament.
Yeah. So if when you look at the team actually on paper and you kind of compare it to the usage stats at Portland, um, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, and Amoonguss, right? I think were the top four used Pokemon. So in terms of the originality factor there, it's a pretty standard core, but the last two Pokemon on the team, being Screamtail and Annihilate, I think those are really what set the team apart. And those two Pokemon in particular being very important aspects of the team, not just filler slots, I think is uh, what really stood out. And so leading up to the tournament, I was really trying to find a defensive answer to a lot of the mons I ultimately ended up using here because Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, and Chi themselves have been so oppressive and alongside things like Qianpao Dragonite as well. So I was really kind of just stuck trying to build a defensive backbone. I tried Tinglu, Arcanine, Palance, that Palance variant, and uh, I kind of was just finding that a lot of people were taking those mons into account while they were building, and so it was very difficult to kind of get squeeze a lot of creativity out of those Pokemon. And especially when I was prepping for regionals, I was thinking that a lot of people are just going to have, tools to cover those Pokemon. So unless I was really committing to kind of a different way of running them, I wasn't feeling very comfortable with the running, Tinglu, Arcanine, and Amoonguss. So ultimately, I settled on Screamtail because it's such a fast Pokemon, but it has a really good bulk. And the premise of the team, like I mentioned on stream as well, was really just you put a bunch of these like bulky setup attackers on the team, and you just support it with Encore Disable. A lot of the times, opponents won't be able to uh, cover both Annihilate and Chi-Yu, and won't really be able to stop them from setting up if you're able to disable super effective attacks. And so I just kind of took that concept, spent about 2 weeks kind of optimizing a couple of EV spreads, and went from there. And uh, I ended up making a couple of adjustments before the tournament, but I was kind of set on this six about 2.5 weeks out from the tournament.
Okay, yeah. So that's like even before EUIC then.
Yeah, so I'd been running Screamtail for a while. I was just really interested in its defensive capabilities. Now, obviously, we've seen it see success with Parrish, in Series 2. Um, but it's just such a flexible Pokemon, and a lot of the times, if your opponent isn't running a booster energy on their Paradox Pokemon, then it's really got a solid speed advantage. It's kind of like a fast-moving tank of sorts, and it provides a lot of flexibility for enabling setup. So I really vibed with that.
Yeah, and I mean also like Chiyu Bundle was not super popular going before EUIC, and then it got two top four
Yeah.
slots, and then at Portland I think it was the highest performing combination of Pokemon, and
Mm-hmm.
so you were way ahead of the curve there too, and even though it got popularized, you still were had maybe one of the most refined teams, I guess, that managed to use that combination, which is really cool,
Mhm.
and you were really rewarded for being ahead of the curve there. But yeah, let's talk about the individual Pokemon and why your Pokemon have the movesets and items and EVs that they do.
Sure. Yeah, I'll get Iron Bundle and Amoonguss out of the way first, because those are probably the most standard sets. So the Iron Bundle is just 252, 252, 4 with the Focus Sash. And it was the primary speed control of the team, in addition to just being in a solid offensive utility slot. It pairs extremely well with every single Pokemon on the team. Um, and it's just hitting really, really hard with its Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry coverage, in addition to being supported by Beads of Ruin. So, um, and then alongside that, Amoonguss, again, just tried and true support Pokemon. It really helps enable, setup in addition to just providing like support option next to something like Flutter Mane that can just click attacks while it's clicking Rage Powder or Spore. And I opted for a standard physically defensive spread because I had enough, I think, special defense covered here on things like Stream Tail with its natural bulk. And I opted to go with a little bit more SPDEF on the Annihilate. So I figured that I'd want something to absorb Ice Spinners or Extreme Speeds and things like that from more physically oriented Pokemon like Chien-Pao and Dragonite. And that really helped in conjunction with the Rocky Helmet and then the Terra Water type. So those two were pretty straightforward in that regard. But the rest of the team was where I think the EVs mattered quite a bit. Um, so I'll move over to Flutter Mane next. It was the last edition of the team. I kind of tacked it on 3 days before the event because that had been kind of like my flex slot. I'd been trying Dragonite in that slot, uh, but I was consistently losing to opposing Iron Bundle, Chi-Yu, and Flutter Mane cores, and I found that through a lot of testing, there was no defensive option that I could put there that could really cover the offensive output of opposing Iron Bundle, Flutter Mane, and Chi-Yu. So when I was looking at the damage calcs, I was like, well, my own specs Fluttermane can just one shot opposing Fluttermane, opposing Chi-Yu, and most of the time, if Iron Bundles are running booster energy, then I'll just one shot those as well if I go for a Terra or just a single target attack. And so I ended up opting for a 252 speed with Modest because I felt like going into this tournament that was an excellent call, given that a lot of people were running these bulkier sets on specs and just opting for a little bit more HP and bulk in general to run substitute with booster energy sets. So I felt like this set was kind of like a stealth counter almost to opposing cores, opposing common bundle Fluttermane and Geocores, and that ended up really uh, like reflecting itself in the tournament run. And then I opted for 116 special attack because I felt like a lot of people were doing calcs for modest 36, and in my testing I just felt like I wasn't getting a lot out of allocating the rest of the EVs in bulk, so I just opted to run 116 special attack because it was picking up things like opposing Fluttermane. Like even if opposing Fluttermane were running like max HP for some odd reason, you could still go for a Terra Fairy next to Chi-Yu and just one shot it. So yeah, I just opted for the speed and power, and the rest was just to dump into its physical defense if I needed to take like the off spread attack like Earthquake or just maybe a weaker priority attack. And then moving on, next I'll cover the Chiyu because that was probably one of the most offensive options on the team. It's also the most important in terms of its setup capability. I opted to run kind of a bulkier set here. The speed hits around 140, so it speed creeps anyone that's trying to run 138 or 139, which is the number that you need to outspeed things like opposing Bundle and Fluttermane after an Icy Wind drop. So I felt like 140 was a solid number to hit there to get the jump. And yeah, modest 116 just hits the special attack bump at 187. So that was quite solid. And when I was looking at Shiyu in general, it actually doesn't really have a single bad stat outside of its HP. So it made a lot of sense to just invest 228 EVs into its HP to allow it the most flexibility to absorb maybe an attack or two and then successfully get a nasty plot up and go from there. So uh, this spread, I believe, came up big for me. It can take a Moonblast from pretty much most common specs Flutter main sets, um, unless they maybe terrestrialize. It can take spread attacks like Earthquake when it goes for Terra Ghost. It can absorb pressure from like even I think Jolly Headlong Rush won't really do a lot to it when it goes for Terra Ghost. So you'll still be able to, maybe in the face of something like a Great Tusk, you can still go for a Terra Ghost and then click Side Pollen Puff and Nasty Plot up if they're not asserting a lot of offensive pressure from the second slot. So that ended up coming up quite a bit in my run, and so the HP there was really useful overall with its other stats. And then moving on to the Screamtail, I felt like the Screamtail set was an excellent call for the tournament. I noticed that when I was running into opposing Screamtail sets, even though there were a few and far between on ladder, a lot of them were opting for way more bulk, and I just think that was wrong because when you look at its natural bulk, it's so good that you only really need to be investing in its hit points. Like I think its speed is its most valuable asset, and the speed investment on this particular Screamtail, it hits 170, and so it's getting the jump on a lot of common, base 100 Pokemon, and it's also just in a solid, I think, range where you're outspeeding a lot of common Scarfers, you're outspeeding, a lot of the Paradox Pokemon that aren't running Booster Energy, and then the rest of the allocation lets it really take all of the attacks that it needs to. It can take Headlong Rush and from a Terra Ground, I believe, Great Tusk. It can absorb pressure from most common specs Flutter main sets, which was the priority for me on this set. I think it can take a Shadow Ball from 116 Modest, which I felt like would be, the second most common set outside of Modest 36. And so it can take the attacks that it needs to, and it's got the longevity there with its Protect. And so that spread was solid. I think the speed stat was what really mattered there. And lastly, with Annihilate, it's a pretty standard set, all things considered. I opted to go for the HP here. Its HP, I think, is its most valuable asset because its stat distribution is really, really great. That just investing in the hit points and then going, I think, Adamant 36 to hit the attack bump, gives it the most flexibility to set a bulk up and just get its Rage Fist going because it doesn't really have the support from its common partner like Mousehold. So just being able to sit on the field with more HP and then the Citrus Berry allows it to just absorb more offensive pressure and get Rage Fist up to the 100 and 150 range that you needed to start doing damage. The speed stat helps you outspeed common Flutter main sets that are running specs or Booster Energy that are modest. I believe it hits 124 speed. So with an Icy Wind drop, you're able to get the drop on a lot of those common Flutter mains. And the rest of the distribution here, the Spadef really helps you take double ups from something like a Flutter main and a Chi-Yu that are trying to click spread attacks like Heat Wave or Dazzling Gleam. So you can Terastallize into a fire type and really absorb those spread attacks and go from there. And then the defense investment allows you to take one Wave Crash from a Palafin that's running 252 Adamant with the Mystic Water. So overall, pretty flexible Annihilate set, and that's the team in terms of its EVs.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like obviously very, very refined. You've been working on this for a long time, but I think, in my opinion, at least as compared to past formats, at least like Series 1, Series 2, where they were a little more wide open, this format, it feels like we know the threats. It's somewhat centralized. We know the hard hitters. And so having these like really refined EV spreads where you know exactly what you're living, exactly what each Pokemon is meant to do, seems like it's really, really valuable. Maybe something that you'll only get if you've played with the team for a long time. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly mention, because I think the moves on this team are pretty self-explanatory, right? I will highlight that I did run Dazzling Gleam on the Screamtail outside of Play Rough. I didn't like Play Rough because, again, I don't like super inaccurate moves. And Dazzling Gleam just pairs really nicely with Chi-Yu when it's on the field, so you can potentially snipe something like a Great Tusk in 2 hits based on how it's EV'd. And then I'll also highlight, I guess, Power Gem because that was my coverage move of choice. I didn't really feel like I needed Thunderbolt on this Fluttermane because I have Freeze Dry, Iron Bundle to cover something like Gyarados. And I guess lastly, I'll just also highlight Heat Wave. I know a lot of people have been running Flamethrower on their Chiyus because it's just a stronger single target attack. But I found that Heat Wave, if you're running something like Screamtail and Amoonguss next to it, you really need to make up for the lack of damage of that slot to cover two slots at the same time. And so I felt like Heat Wave was just the call if you're going to run Amoonguss and Screamtail and you're going to be leading it alongside those two. I believe Heat Wave was just better than Flamethrower, at least for this team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like it was mostly Heat Wave at UIC, but then I saw like Ashton was running Flamethrower on his set.
Yeah.
And I saw a couple other people running Flamethrower at Portland. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see that kind of go back and forth. Like you mentioned, inaccurate moves are always scary. When I was running Chiyu, my experience is that I feel like a lot of end games you come down to like, okay, I got to hit 2 Heat Waves. I got an 80% chance of winning, which is always a scary spot to be in. But a lot of times you also aren't in that. You don't have that win condition if you can't hit both slots. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that.
but yeah, I gotta point it out. You got some chaotic energy going on with the protect in a different slot for each different Pokemon. I really hope it wasn't like that on
Yeah,
cartridge. I have the rental code. Is it like? Oh my god, it is.
yeah. So I'm just gonna quickly say, like, if you look at the rental code quickly, like the way I order my moves, like it's very much based on like the way like it's very color coded. Like I always put uh like the I always sequence it. Like I put the moves of the same type closer to the bottom, and so the way it ends up working out is protect is usually in the first slot, and all my friends really hate it. Like I think I gave my a while ago I gave one of my friends the rent like a rental team. I believe it was Maddie, and Maddie is very obsessive about how he orders his moves, and he just said he could not like he just could not play the team. Like he had to get the mons in game. He could not use my rental code because like just the move order was really upsetting him. So I totally get it. I totally get it if somebody wants to take the team and just make it on cart for themselves because the move order can be a little bit frustrating, especially if you tend to time out. Like you don't want to be locked, you don't want to be timing out into protect. But I don't know. It's just something of color coding for me. I just like to order my moves like this, and I have been doing it like it since day one. So
That's really funny. I mean, obviously, whatever works for each individual, go with what works for you. But
yeah,
also, like, I don't think I've seen people put protect first. I've seen people put protect last. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put protect in different slots based on the color of their various moves. But
yeah, yeah.
that's really interesting.
It's just weird. It's weird. All my friends hate it, but it's just the way. It's just the way it is for me. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, that was a really good explanation of the team. Like you said, you've been using this for so long that everything just feels like it's really nailed down. In hindsight, would you make any changes to the team, or do you think it was pretty much perfect?
Um. So I had Amoonguss pegged as one of the slots I'd probably change. Not the mon itself, but maybe the item. I thought a lot about Citrus Berry. So initially, why I put Rocky Helmet is because when you're playing against something like Chien Pao Dragonite, you can go for Terra Ghost and then just like Rage Powder, right? And the Chien Pao will break its Focus Sash. It'll just KO it with Heat Wave. And Terra Normal E Speed just can't pick up the Chiyu, right? So you'll be in an excellent position. But as I started playing the team more, I found that I was just leading Screamtail and Annihilate into those, uh, teams, and I wasn't really bringing Chiyu Amoonguss. So that's really why I had Rocky Helmet was to punish oppressive physical attackers like that. And while it was nice, I did catch a couple of Chien Paos. I might change the item to Covert Cloak moving down because I two of my losses I think in the tournament were to Rock Slide flinches, and uh, I feel like just having Covert Cloak to avoid that would be really nice. But maybe I'm over respecting Rock Slide, but I was really kind of just I did not get to play the game in a couple of my sets thanks to Rock Slide, and maybe I would just make that change because the rest of my Pokemon really don't want to be taking Rock type attacks. Iron Bundle does not want to take Rock Slide. Chiyu doesn't really want to unless it tears out. Fluttermane doesn't really have a strong defense stat, so it's really only Annihilate that wants to absorb that. And if you're playing against T-Tar, then it's usually Terra Flying, and if you want to go into Terra Fire, you're taking super effective damage from Rock Slide. So yeah, I found that I was leading Amoonguss into teams like that a lot, and if I'm just getting flinched and can't click sport, then it's kind of useless. So
Yeah,
might change that to Cobra Cloak later.
makes sense.
Uh,
I mean, we saw Len make top cut with Lycan Rock Tyrant turn. So if that starts to pick up,
yeah, yeah.
especially as Chiyu bundle starts to pick up, it seems like some decent counterplay. That makes a lot
Mhm.
of sense to have a little bit more responses to people trying to click rock moves into you.
Yeah, yeah. So
But
that's about it. Yeah, I think that honestly that and then maybe changing the Flutter main maybe set because again, like I said, the Flutter main set was a call for this tournament that I ran max speed in 116 because I felt like I needed more offense to check opposing mirrors. But maybe down the line, if the meta progresses to a point where you might want to run more bulk, or maybe run a bulky spec Flutter, maybe change the item to Life Orb and run a protect, an additional protect. It's up in the air, but those two slots are probably the ones that are subject to change. I don't think the Screamtail needs to change. The Iron Bundle, I mean, if you want to run Covert Cloak on Iron Bundle, that's up to you. But I feel like Focus Sash for survivability is just a lot better, especially if it's your only speed control mon. And yeah, I think there's obviously small changes anyone can make to be more comfortable. But I think if you're looking at the team long term, uh, looking at the Amoonguss item, it can be Citrus or Covert, and looking at the Flutter main set and what you enjoy playing the most is probably the best thing.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, with
Mm.
that, that's a great segue into talking about how to actually play the team. And
Okay.
so, tell me about how you approach team preview and what your game plans looked like, especially into some of the more common teams you might face in the tournament.
Yeah. So in the more common balance teams, let's say I'm playing against a balance team, which is probably what a lot of people were running on the ladder in their preparation. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it. I personally like to bring Screamtail Chiyu at lead a lot. I find that that's a very flexible lead because when you're playing against balanced teams, a lot of the time they want to bring something like Arcanine at lead or they want to bring something like Amoonguss at lead. And yeah, like the Terra Grass option on Screamtail, you can absorb a spore, right? Or you can protect and then go for a Terra Grass, and you have the safety goggles so you can eat spores on that slot. And you have the ability to have a defensive pivot in Amoonguss that can also switch in on spore. So I like the ability to have flexibility into those common balance teams that want to start disrupting immediately and then position end games with Palafin and something like their Flutter main late in the game. I feel like having an aggressive check to those with mons like Screamtail and Chiyu at lead really helps. If I'm playing something like a Chien Pao Dragonite team, then that wants to be really aggressive into this team, uh, Screamtail and Annihilate again, very solid lead into something like that. And so again, similar concept. You're able to click protect twice. You know, you have the immunity to extreme speed, and you can also go for Terrifier if need be to absorb Ice Spinner a little bit better. And yeah, so basically the premise of the team again, going back, is just to disable attacks and start clicking Nasty Plot or Bulk Up, and then overlap that with the switch into something like Bundle if you need speed control. Overlap that with the switch into something like Fluttermane if you need an additional mon to clean up or use Amoonguss as a defensive swap. So I think that's the approach into those balance teams and something like Qianpao Dragonite. Other than that, let's say we're playing a Dozo team. Into a Dozo team, you have quite a few options here. Um, since a lot of common Dozo at the moment are running Terra Grass and Terra Steel, you have a lot of options to hit them with everything on this team, both offensively and from a defensive standpoint. You can go for a strategy where you lead Screamtail, trying to catch Dozo and just trap it into Encore Disable. Or you can opt for something like a Moongus and Bundle together to put it to sleep and then try to freeze dry it down. If you're expecting them to go for a Terra, then you have the option to just maybe lock it into Encore Disable and then try to hit it down with Heat Waves. So there's a lot of flexible options when you see the open team sheet that you can really use a different combination into standard Dozo teams as well. Uh, when I'm playing against other, I guess, Fluttermane, Chiyu, and Iron Bundles, I really like to lead my own Amoonguss and Fluttermane into those teams, primarily because Fluttermane is like I mentioned earlier, Fluttermane is such a great answer into itself, in addition to just hitting Bundle and Chiyu so hard that if you can even buy it one extra turn to just fire off a Terra Fairy Moonblast or Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, it'll kind of just delete, opposing Bundle and Chiyu. So And Amoonguss just, its job is usually if it can live for 2 to 3 turns, it's amazing. You usually only need it to live about a turn or two for it to help its partner kind of create momentum for the team. So into opposing offense mirrors, that's a very viable lead as well. And let's say another matchup, I guess that's important to cover is also maybe Tinglu balance that's not running Palfin. Tinglu balance teams that might be opting for something like Mousehold. I've seen a lot of Mousehold Annihilate together with Tinglu. If you're playing against something like that, you can approach that in a couple of different ways. You can use Chiyu if you're feeling particularly adventurous, if you think you can get away with nasty plotting up in front of it. If not, I think the safer option is always to go with Annihilate against those types of teams because it usually has a pretty free setup. And you're able to kind of just set up the Annihilate for free against something like Tinglu and a Dragonite, for example, that want to lead and click Terra Blast and EQ. You can just click Protect, disable Terra Blast, and start clicking Bulk Up. And it's usually not, it's usually pretty quick game. Another one I also highlight is playing against the Snow, because Snow has been popping up a lot recently. I played it myself a lot on ladder. I don't think this team has anything to fear against Snow because you have Terra Fire on the Annihilate, so you can just Terra it if you don't want to risk getting frozen by Blizzard. You also have a Fire type in Chiyu that can come in and clean up games. So oftentimes when I was playing Snow, I would just be leading Screamtail and Annihilate, double protect, disable Blizzard, bulk up. Now you have two ice types that are just feeding you health points. And if they want to Terra like something like usually it's like Terra Ice on the bundle, so that's not a threat at all. It just gets Drain Punched. And if they want to go for Terra Water on something like Obama Snow, then you're just covering that late in the game with your own bundle. And also takes a lot of damage from something like Fluttermane if you decide to bring it in the back. And I'll also review Sun quickly because, of course, it won the tournament. While I did end up losing to Joe, I do think this team has a fine matchup. It does come down to Rock Slide, of course. If you don't get flinched by Rock Slide, I think you're in a pretty solid position most of the time. And it also really depends on the player that you're playing against and how they're playing Sun. But I really like to lead Iron Bundle and Amoonguss because let's say they lead something like Torkoal plus maybe an attacker. You can just click Icy Wind, and Torkoal's eject pack will activate if it's eject pack, and force it to swap out, and then you can just click Spore for free into that slot, or you can try to Spore the Great Tusk slot or the other slot. And they don't really have a free swap into Jump Bluff. If they're bringing Jump Bluff, then you have a free switch into Chiyu, right? You can go into Chiyu and then click like Terra Water Spore, or you can just click Protect and swap into Chiyu if they're leading Torkoal Jump Bluff. And yeah, once you pretty much remove their options for speed control and you can weather kind of their early offense, the team kind of just folds to Screamtail late in games because it's running two very offensive choice locked Pokemon. And once Tailwind expires, that's if they bring Tailwind, but if it expires, they're just going to get disabled and they lose the game. They can't really play the game from there. So, but yeah, again, you have to dodge a couple of Rock Slide flinches in that matchup, and from there you're pretty much sailing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
I think
fantastic overview.
yeah, I think that covers most of them. Let me know if you have like another couple if you matchups that you might want to go over. But I think that's a majority of what I saw on ladder, and that's a majority of what I played. It's just balance, snow, a couple of weather teams, and I didn't face a lot of there wasn't a lot of deviation from that even in the tournament itself. So
That pretty much
yeah.
encapsulates what I perceive as the metagame, more or less. It sounds like again you got really you figured out your game plans, and those all seem really solid. And Screamtail, the way you're describing it, it does really put in work, and it's cool to see the flexibility in how you use it too. Where some matchups it's really powerful on lead, some matchups you see choice lock Pokemon, you bring it in back, and it really does seem like a very versatile Pokemon, more so than you would think just looking at the set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Encore itself as a move has just picked up so much in usage. Obviously Joe won with it on his Jump Bluff, but a lot of people are opting for it on their support bundle sets, and it's just a very strong move. And like I mentioned, I think that's a product of the format itself. It's a very offensive format, and it's very easy to exploit a lot of the common defensive cores in the format. Like it's not particularly hard if you've been working on a team long enough to figure out that a lot of these teams fold if one of their defensive linchpin falls apart, you know,
Hmm.
and that's very easy to overwhelm a particular slot and then, I kind of force balance teams into a corner. And that's another reason why I think they didn't do that, particularly amazing at Portland. And I think this team kind of adopts a different way of playing into balance. Encore disable again puts in a lot of work right now because you're just limiting the damage you're taking while still being able to maintain a more offensive outlook. You don't have to invest a lot into your defenses, and you don't have to waste slots, waste a lot of slots, I would say, on defensive Pokemon. Like this team does not need to use Arcanine Tinglu just to hold like four other Pokemon together. Obviously you go Screamtail and Amoonguss, but doing that, you're able to run four really, really powerful offensive Pokemon with amazing dual types. You have Dark, Fire, Fairy, Ghost. You know, what's it called? Annihilate has the Fighting Ghost, and then you obviously have the Ice and Water type. So much offensive coverage, and it's very easy to just flank them with two support mons like this and just overwhelm balanced teams.
Hmm. It makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. And so I guess on that note, let's talk about your tournament run. So you went
sure.
12-2 in Swiss. I think you were the number
Yeah,
one overall seed after Swiss. I might be wrong about that, or number two.
I was fourth. I was fourth.
You were fourth.
Yeah,
Oh wow, there were a lot of 12-2s, huh?
yeah, yeah. There
But
was a lot of 12-2s. Yeah,
but yeah, and then 12-2 in Swiss, so really really strong record, and then you lost in top eight. So talk to
yeah.
me about some of the notable matchups that you had in your tournament run.
Yeah. So I started the day 2-0. I was feeling pretty good about my team, but I quickly dropped down to 2-2 really fast. Um, and it was looking a little bit dire. I wasn't very confident in the team at that point, and I wasn't feeling like I was playing particularly well. In my round 3A, again played a Lycanroc T-Tar, and then round 4, I just completely misplayed to drop myself into a pretty bad spot. But I was able to win 5 sets in a row, and I didn't drop a single game in those sets. So it was a pretty dominant run from the team. And I think on day 2 as well, it's just another very dominant run. I only dropped 2 games. So only 2 games dropped in 10 sets played in order to get to the top 8 spot. So uh, in terms of notable matchups, I would say the first one was obviously the one that pops up to me is my set against Alberto Lara. We both played each other at X2, and it was, we were both playing for our tournament lives, and the matchup was pretty interesting. I think, like, when you look at his team, he's been running this core for such a long time. Uh, and it poses a lot of tricky questions with screens and the Scarf Garchomp, and he had Tailwind as well. So there's a lot of options, and I had to play a little bit cracked in the matchup. Um, so in game 1, I led my Amoonguss and Chiyu, and I just left the Amoonguss in front of his Chiyu. I'm like, he's probably gonna think that I'm gonna click Terra Water or Protect. I don't think he's gonna target me, so I just clicked Spore Nasty Plot turn 1, and I got away with it. And late in the game, he brought in his Corviknight and Garchomp, and I just had Screamtail. So again, double protect, and that's really where the Screamtail spread came in because again, Scarf Garchomp, if it's running Jolly, it hits 169. My Screamtail hits 170. So if for some reason he changed his spread, I was still always outspeeding him and disabling his Earthquake, and I was able to pick up both knockouts with my Chi-Yu. So pretty risky turn 1 against Alberto ended up paying off in game 1, and then he made an adjustment in game 2, switching over to his Roaring Moon to try to apply tailwind pressure. But once again, my Chi-Yu, he gave my Chi-Yu way too much time to just set up. And in the second game, I went for the mix-up of going for Terra Water on the Amoonguss, and ended up creating enough space for me where Chi-Yu was able to do its thing and set up and really lock down the end game. And yeah, if you look at his team, he doesn't really have an amazing matchup in the Spore. He needs to go for Terra Grass on the Chi-Yu, and that's not, always advisable against a team that's also running Chi-Yu. So, um, yeah, so that was a very tense matchup. I was very worried about that because we were playing for our tournament lives, but it ended up working out for me. A couple of risky plays, and I was able to win the set at the end 2-0. The next set I'll highlight was my win and in round against Philip Wingett. I think that's a +1. Um, his team was really interesting. You can see like the life orb Murkrow was definitely a very, um, I guess, different choice given where the meta is at this point. Um, his whole team, I really like the way his team was composed because it poses a lot of interesting questions at team preview. He can speed the game up with Tailwind and Earthquake, or Tailwind and Specs make it rain, or he can slow the game down with something like Mouse Ape or Mouse Goldango. Um, so I went for a kind of a neutral approach. I led Amoonguss Chiyu because I felt like that covers just about everything outside of Murkrow Garchomp, and I have pivots available if he does that. I can also go for Terra Water if need be to put a Pokemon to sleep because Brave Bird plus Earthquake double up probably would not KO my Amoonguss. So I felt like that was a very, very solid lead into his team. In the first game, he ended up leading his Goldango and his Murkrow, and I just let him. Like I mentioned earlier, I just met with my Amoonguss and Chiyu, and uh, yeah, he just dropped a Heat Wave like both of his Mons. Like I don't know what his EV investment was. I don't think Goldango can really survive Heat Wave anywhere, but his Murkrow also just dropped to Heat Wave. So I picked up a double knockout turn 1 with uh, not a lot of resistance, and I was able to protect my Amoonguss. And against a team like this, if you do pick up a double knockout, it's a pretty quick game after that, because you're playing a 4v2 and you've still got your Amoonguss. So, and he doesn't really have a lot of great ways to deal with Amoonguss if something like Goldango goes down very early. And then in the second game, he went for an approach of trying to use Garchomp and his Glamora, and I was just able to trap his Glamora with Encore Disable and position an endgame where Fluttermane was able to clean up. So again, it was a bit tricky, but relatively straightforward at the end when I look back on it. I think lastly, I think the set that everyone's probably most wants to know about is probably my top 8 set against Joe. Uh, yeah, so that set was pretty anticlimactic. Like what Joe and I. So fun story. Joe and I actually played with our regional teams. We must have played about 15, 10 or between 10 and 15 sets. Um, and we really didn't think we'd probably face each other. I was kind of not going in with high hopes that I'd be in a position to be playing in the second day, but we ended up facing each other in top 8. Funny enough, we were actually sitting there refreshing the page to see the standings, and we were actually preparing for different opponents when the standings changed last minute, and we were locked into playing each other. So pretty much the prep that we'd been putting in for each of our opponents, because I thought I was going to play Len, and he thought he was going to play um, uh, somebody else. I think it was the Dozo player. So we were just prepping for our respective opponents, and then we locked into each other, and we didn't really have a lot of time. So we kind of just fell back on the instincts from our practice sets. And yeah, so he ended up leading Torkoal and his Great Tusk in game 1, and then immediately going for a hard swap into King Gambit against my Amoonguss and Iron Bundle lead. I believe this was because I had conditioned him in practice to expect the Icy Wind Spore play. And yeah, I just this time though I thought he'd probably be aware of that, and I just like double protect. The following turn I went for Spore Freeze Dry, but he got a Rock Slide flinch, and then my bundle was just useless. And that turn was a huge swing turn. If I connect that Freeze Dry, his Great Tusk goes down. It's a relatively straightforward game after that for me. I don't think he had a chance of winning that first game, but that Rock Slide flinch happens, and then yeah, he kind of just goes on to win from there. And in the second game, I will admit he did play a lot better in the second game. I went for a Terra Water on the Amoonguss, but he had his Jump Bluff in the back this time around, and he was just able to get a Sleep Powder off and to add injury to insult. Sorry, I should say insult to injury. My bad. He just got a 3-turn sleep on the Amoonguss, and I was just throwing my hands up in the air. I'm like, I can't do a lot about that. I tried what I could late in the game with Screamtail to claw it back against this Qianpao Great Tusk, but he had Terrifier available, and he just kind of cleaned up the set from there. So a lot of the options that I had that would have been effective in the matchup just were neutralized by Sleep or Rock Slide, so I couldn't really play the game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think those 3 were the most notable sets, and I think those 3 matchups were probably the most memorable. from my run. Other than that, it was just a lot of balance after round four, and yeah, not a lot to write home about other than I just clicked Encore Disable Nasty Plot majority of the sets and just managed to sweep through.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again on your really, really incredible performance. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the channel and sharing your team again. It's such a cool team. Definitely recommend that you try it out. The rental code is on screen right now, and the paste will be in the description below the video. Did you have any final words or shoutouts that you want to give?
Yeah, I'll just quickly shout out my friends. Obviously, Izzy and Pato. They helped me get my team together last minute. I had a lot of these mons from my Vancouver team, actually, like uh, so I didn't have the Terra crystals though. So that's what I should say, the Terra shards. So I needed those last minute before I drove down, and both of them helped me get those mons ready. Huge shout out to Will Alice, which is Pain. He helped create the spread on Stream Till an Island. Well, I should say he created the spreads and gave them to me. Said I was running like my EVs were a little bit bad on those two mons, so he was kind of the mastermind behind those two mons in particular. And then yeah, just a huge shout out to Joe again. He's one of my best friends in VGC, and even though it was heartbreaking to lose to him in top eight, um, I'm just so happy for him. While it is a heartbreaking loss for me, he's seen even more heartbreak this season, two second place finishes. So couldn't have come at a better time for him, and just really proud of him. And yeah, anyone else that reached out at the tournament or reached out in DMs, just a huge shout out to them as well, for all their support that weekend. I felt really, really good, and I can't really ask for better friends and a better community to be behind me when I'm playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are all the questions that I have. And so, again, thank you for coming on the channel. And until next time, I'll see you all later.
Take care.